Hello and welcome to Produced By. Just quickly before we begin, if you enjoy the show, please consider supporting it by joining our Patreon. You can choose from a list of memberships and will receive some exciting rewards. Thank you, and back to the episode. Hello Darren, thank you for joining us today and welcome to the show.
That's right, Thomas, thanks for having me, mate.
So Darren, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, so my name's Darren Palatina. I'm 39 from the UK. Currently, I've got a 3-year-old daughter, and currently working as a graphic designer, specialising in LinkedIn profile optimization. So yeah, I've got a past history with military, been through the military for 14 years, and then decided to finally take the leap into graphic design in January 2022.
That's quite interesting career change.
Yeah, well, it's a big jump. I wanted to do graphic design for 15 years. When I was younger, I wanted to do graphic design, but then at the same time, before joining the army, I was in a punk band for 9 years. In a punk band, I was doing drugs and wanted to get out of that scene. So I ended up joining the army just to get away. And then obviously the army then took over my life, and it was 15 years down the road before I actually managed to get around to becoming a graphic designer. So
starting with your background or with your childhood, can you tell us more about where do you come from?
Yeah, so I live just outside of Shrewsbury now in UK, but I was actually born in Shrewsbury. So over the years, I've done a whole 360 degrees back to where I started. When I was a lot younger, I did live up out in the countryside, up in what we refer to as up in the sticks or out in the sticks. Childhood, I raced motocross for, oh God, how long was that? 7-8 years. We used to, as kids, we used to build tree houses, go hunting. The normal countryside childhood really coming up. My mum and dad were together until I was 11, and then they divorced when I was 11. So then that kind of changed the trajectory of my life then. So we obviously moved out the countryside into a town. That's when I started to get mixed in with the wrong crowd and get into the drugs, and that kind of led on from there, really.
And as you mentioned, you were in a punk or rock band. What was your role in the band?
I was a bass player. Yeah, I played bass for... I actually played bass for 9 years. So the band went... Well, it was about 10 years I played bass for. The band was going for about 9 years. We had an 11-track album. So we recorded an album. We did, oh bloody hell, must be 4 UK tours, 3 or 4 UK tours. We did
really?
Loads of local gigs and everything. So we were doing pretty well, but it was we were very young at the time. Like when the band ended, I was 22 when I joined the army. So 9 years before that, what would that have been? 14, 15 years old when I started the band.
And back then, did you see it as your career?
Being a musician? I enjoyed the band. I really enjoyed I loved it, but the problem was, like, I'm very driven and motivated, and I kept trying to drive forward, but it's very difficult when you've got other band members, if you like, who have got similar ideas and not so similar ideas and different priorities. So you're kind of trying to move forward with something that is very difficult to move. So I think if you're going to be in a band, you all need to be in the same mindset. And at the time, I was, like I said, I used to do a lot of drugs when I was younger. I used to be, ecstasy, speed, cocaine. But my guitarist and my drummer was more cannabis. So they were downers and I was uppers, and I was always trying to be the motivated one, so yeah.
And was it the drugs? Because it's in a, was it specifically in your band, or is it common in this music industry in general?
I think drugs in general are pretty common. But I came from a motocross background. I raced motocross. We did BMX, dirt jumping, mountain biking. I was a downhill mountain biker, and like the people I used to mix with when I was a lot younger, We were always drinking, always smoking, always doing drugs. You know, the normal, I say normal teenage stuff, but probably not normal for some people. You know, and then we got into like the clubbing scene, you know, when I was a little bit older, got into the clubbing scene, and that just pushed it even further into the drugs. And, you know, like, I don't regret it as such, but I would never do it again now. You know, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad I did drugs from the point of view where I know what to look out for now. If my daughter was getting in with the wrong crowd, or if she was, you know, obviously not 3 years old, but when she's a bit older, I know the effects of drugs now. You know, like dilated pupils and stuff like that. So, you know, you can always keep an eye out for that now.
So now, as you are older and you are a parent, is there some piece of advice that you would share with whether younger people or parents, you know, to avoid kids being into drugs?
I think as she gets older, obviously, I think the best thing to do with kids once they get to, like, you know, especially their teenage years, is to get them into, you know, sports, things like martial arts or horse riding or biking or something along those lines to keep them occupied. Because when kids get bored or teenagers get bored, they start to look for some form of entertainment, and unfortunately, that can lead down the drug route as well. So yeah.
So then, what was that switch that made you to stop with the band and join the army?
So for a couple of years, I was trying to get out of the drug scene, and I kept trying and trying and trying, and every time I tried, I'd get pulled back in. And, you know, obviously with the band, it was like the band was in that scene, so it was very difficult to. I wasn't so much a drug addict; it was just a habit in terms of, you know, just being part of that environment. And then I started to get really bad health issues, like skin problems, and I noticed it was drugs. So basically, I had real bad, you know, dermatitis on the hands, where your skin breaks and dries out. It's like eczema. And I had really bad eczema and dermatitis on my hands, and I put
Sorry,
that
was
down.
that because of those drugs?
Yeah, well, I didn't know at the time that it was because of the drugs, but I put it down to working in construction, because at the time I was also working as a labourer on a construction site. And there was a period over 3 weeks where I didn't take any drugs for about 3 weeks, and my hands started clearing up and started recovering. And then one night I went out and I took some ecstasy, so pills. And the next morning my hands were back as bad as they were. So that made the connection to, okay, that it's the drugs that's causing it. And then at that point, I was like, I've got to get out of this scene. So I was like, I need to, you know, get away from drugs, sort my life out. And then I moved back in with my mum, who lived out in the countryside at that time. Then she'd moved back to the countryside, so I moved up there to get away from the drugs. And I said, I'm going in the army. So I just trained for 6 months, started running, getting fit, training every day, eating healthy, hydrating, and my health got a lot better. My fitness picked up, and then I signed up to the army, and that was it for 14 years after that in the military.
But I feel like you make it sound kind of that was easy switch, but was it actually easy, or how did you find it?
I think for me it was relatively easy, because I wanted to get away so bad. I think if you've really got to want to change, if you're going to change. Like, I was speaking to my therapist, my hypnotherapist, for the PTSD thing the other week, and we were talking about, you know, like, you can't just offer somebody hypnotherapy if they don't want to change themselves. Like, it doesn't work. I think because I was in the mindset for like 2 years before making that move, for 2 years I just wanted to get away anyway. So it was very easy for me to make that switch.
And what about the rest of the band?
So shortly after I left, the band fell apart. My guitarist then moved to Germany. I can't remember where about in Germany he moved to, but then my drummer joined another band locally to where he lives. You know, so they carried on going there. I don't speak to them anymore. We didn't keep in contact. And, like, to be honest, if it's a potential risk of me getting pulled back into that scene, I wouldn't want to go there anyway. So it's easier for me to just avoid it now.
And looking back at it, is there something you regret when it comes to band and, you know, these conditions with the drugs?
Not really, no. No, like, my health's good now. I'm in good shape, and my diet could probably be better. And obviously we've got a 3-year-old daughter, so our sleep could definitely improve as well. But that'll improve over time, But no, I don't think I regret anything at all.
Mhm.
You know.
And with the choice of joining the army, I understand that it gives you discipline, change of life, and everything. But weren't you thinking about just changing different job or starting some kind of sport or just a different route?
Well, at the time, I was already into mountain biking and motocross, and even with that, I was still getting pulled into the band scene was the biggest part of my life at the time. So that was really the thing that kept pulling me back. So
Mhm.
if I was at the time, if I was a lot more financially stable, I would have probably moved to a different town anyway, which would probably had the same impact and resolve the issue.
Yeah. Okay. And then, so with the army, can you take us more through the journey? Because as someone who's never been through, through the army, don't really know what is it like. So introduce it
Yeah.
to us a bit.
So the first thing, so when people hear about the military, they always say, I had the same thing. It was like people saying, "Oh, they're going to brainwash you, and you're going to lose your head and all this." And they don't brainwash you as such. You get conditioned and trained to deal with certain situations. But I remember, so I've been training for like 6 months, and I joined the infantry, which is just frontline. The guys at the front there, and I joined the Welsh Guards, and as soon as I got to North Yorkshire, so Catterick is where they train, and I got there off the bus, and literally the second I got off the bus, it was just run everywhere. You didn't have time to walk. You had like all these massive bags with you, and they were just like run, 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 run. Like,
Mhm.
Jesus, I've only just got here. Like, give me a minute, So that was a real big um, culture shock. I think culture shock might be the right word, but it was definitely a shock to the system. Going from running as I want to at the speed I wanted to getting off a bus with bags, just sprinting everywhere.
Mhm.
But I went through 13 weeks. So it was 20 at the time. I think it was 26 weeks of training, and week 13, I tore my cartilage in my left knee, so I got a knee injury, and it was a real bad injury. I couldn't keep running, couldn't keep training, so I went into what they call holdover, which is where you get into a recovery part of the training unit. And after a couple of weeks in there, I thought, you know what, I want to come back. I want to leave and rejoin as something else where I can get a trade out of it. Because like infantry don't typically have a trade unless you're specialising in like radio or something like that. But I decided to leave and then rejoin a regiment called the Royal Engineers. So they were combat engineers. And
Mhm.
with them, I could join. I'd already got like 8 years in construction, so I was doing tiling, flooring, decorating and stuff like that. And there was a trade in the Royal Engineers called a building and structural finisher. So that meant I could go in there doing tiling and flooring and the stuff I was used to doing, but also trained to be a soldier,
Mhm.
as well as working with like bridges, explosives, and start to have a bit of fun with it as well. It was hard work, but going through there, then I ended up going through basic training, which was I think that was 14 weeks. I went through basic training, and then I gone through first phase 1 training, phase 2 training, which is my engineer's course, then into phase 3, which is my trade training. And then after that, then I went straight to my unit, and within 4 months of getting to my unit, I was then deployed to Oman on a construction tour to help build
Sorry,
an army.
where is it?
Oman. So it's over by
Okay.
Jordan. Yeah, Oman.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, it's over by Jordan. I went over there. It was not a war zone or anything like that. It was a construction tour. So we go there. We're building an air force base. And then that was seven. I think I was there for 7 months.
Mhm.
And
And
then
was that something that you wanted to do to go to work to a different country, or was it they told you and you had to?
so you have to deploy where they say you're deploying. But I really wanted to start seeing the world. That was my goal with the military, is to get away from the drugs, change my life, and start seeing more places other than just the UK.
Mhm.
So as soon as the opportunity came to go to Oman, I was like, yeah, let's, there was no resistance. I was just like, yeah, I'm ready to go. Because at the time I was single, didn't have kids. I just wanted to start seeing a bit more. So yeah, I was happy to go. And then, like I said, I was there for about 7 months, and then when I came back, um, obviously we do a lot of training back in UK, Cold War training and all sorts of stuff like that. And then the opportunity came later on, in 2000, and I think it was the beginning of 2010. We got we got a notification saying that our unit was going to Afghanistan. So
Mm.
that was another opportunity to travel. I'd already been to
Mhm.
Jordan, Oman, Cyprus at that point. And then they said, the unit was going to be deploying as IED search teams. So an IED search team is basically bomb disposal, effectively. So the roadside bombs and all that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. An IED, they call them IEDs, so improvised explosive device. And the IED search teams, what they would do, they would be the guys at the very front, searching for those bombs in the road, and that's what our job consisted of for 7 months in Afghan. So we would be there to just find the bombs, clear the roads, clear the compounds, and that sort of stuff. So that was the last tour. That's where, obviously, on that tour that I went on, that deployment, that was where all the PTSD came from, and all the problems that we faced.
And if you compare this last tour to Afghanistan to the previous one, was it more dangerous than the previous one because of
Way
the
more.
nature of the job?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, because of the nature. So when we went to Oman, we didn't take weapons. There's no rifles. We didn't take anything like that because there's no risk of conflict.
Mhm.
We were able to get the bus, go into the town, go around the shopping centres, the supermarkets, go to the barbers, get haircuts. So Oman was really safe.
So would that be almost, don't want to say regular life, but closer to the normal life?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, much closer to normality, really. But Afghanistan was just a completely different thing altogether. You were there in a country where people wanted you dead. You had casualties, you had jobs that you had to do, you had bombs to deal with. Um,
Mhm.
there was a lot that went on in that deployment.
Mhm. Yeah,
Mm.
and just briefly, I also wanted to ask you, because before you joined the army, you tried to prepare yourself physically. So, thanks to your preparation, did you find it easier afterwards, or did you wish that you trained even more?
No, I wish I trained more. So
Yeah.
I trained. I think a lot of people go into the military with the minimum requirement of fitness. So you know that you've got to run a mile and a half in this amount of time. You've got to be able to do X amount of press ups and sit ups. And I think so many people, the problem is you train, and I did the same. You train to meet that minimum standard, but then when it comes to the job, like Afghanistan, we were carrying I think around 70 to 80 kilos on our back.
Mm.
So
Yeah.
it's a hell of a weight, and then you might have to walk 2 or 3 miles to a job, and
And
you've
it's
got 70
crazy weather, right?
yeah,
And
70 degrees heat, in
mm.
Celsius. So it's really hot. You've got a long walk, and you're carrying your body weight on your back. So nothing can really prepare you for that. I know the military do further training, like combat fitness tests and tactical advance into battle, or tabs they call it. So you do train with weight, but yeah, the training with the minimum fitness level wouldn't come close. Like if you're only training for that minimum standard, and you
Mhm.
suddenly had to go out to Afghan, you wouldn't make it. You wouldn't survive because I'm not saying you'd die, but like you wouldn't be able to carry that weight for that
Yeah,
amount of
yeah.
time.
And can you say what is maybe approximate ratio of people who sign up for the army and don't make it?
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know, to be honest. It's a difficult one because I know, like, if you were to join like the parachute regiment or Marines, there's a much higher fail rate. And if you were to join like the Navy as a diver, that's another one. I joined the Navy as a diver after the army.
Mhm.
Um, that was a very high level of fitness again. But I wouldn't know what the ratio is. Like quite a few people get through.
Mhm.
Um, but like it's important to note that when you go through, they build you up fitness wise over a 3-month or 6-month period, depending on what you're joining.
Mhm.
But you do see some people that join with minimum fitness, and then within 3 or 4 weeks they're injured, they're in rehab, holdover,
Yeah.
whatever it be, and that some people just don't get through at all.
Mhm.
And some people, I've come across some people that have been in recovery for like 12 months or more, trying to
Mm.
recover from back injury or knee injuries or ankle injuries, whatever it be. So yeah, I wouldn't know what the ratio is, to be honest, but
Yeah.
it's got quite a high pass rate.
Mhm. And also, if you compare yourself to other people who joined the army, would you say that you were on a similar level, or maybe you were better when it comes to fitness, or under?
So I was good at running naturally because I haven't got any weight on me. Obviously, all the drugs that I took throughout the years, that was keeping my weight down. I haven't got weight problems anyway, but it kept my weight down, which meant when I got off the drugs and started to recover from that, it was very easy for me to pick running up. And where my
Mhm.
mum lived, she lived in the countryside, so it was at the bottom of a really long hill, and it was about a mile to the top of the hill where there was a junction, like a turning. So my training for running was a mile uphill, a mile back downhill. So I got the hill training in as well, where a lot of people are running on the flat.
Mhm.
So I feel that for those who train to the minimum standard, I was better equipped for strength in running because of that hill that I used to go and train on.
Mhm. Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, and then coming back to your experience in Afghanistan, can you expand on what happened there, or what give you the experience that you went through?
Yeah, so obviously we were there to clear bombs, roads. There was quite a few times where there'd be some sort of firefight there. We weren't really there for firefighting. We were there to clear roads. So we had an infantry unit with us to give fire support, when we
Mhm.
were clearing roads and clearing compounds. But during our deployment, we had some friends that were injured. A couple had been killed. Um, there was a guy called Rifleman James Steele. He was in an infantry unit. We had to recover his body parts because he stepped on an IED. He died, but we
Mhm.
had to go and recover. As an IED search team, part of our responsibility is to go and recover any parts, body parts, weapons, search equipment, and things like to gather like intelligence as well to find out what kind of IED had been used, the device.
Mhm.
And that's what we were there to do. So, we recovered his body parts, and um, we had quite a few things like that. Like 2012, we had a mortar got fired at our base. Mortars, they're like kind of like rockets, if you like, but that came through our tent roof. So where our tent was on base, we weren't in the tent at the time, we were out. But it landed, it hit our tent, it went straight into our tent, and just blew our tent to pieces. So it's
Oh my
yeah,
God.
quite a few close calls. If that rocket or that mortar had come in 24 hours earlier, that it would have killed us all because we were all asleep in the tent at the time. Because we just got back
Mm.
from R&R. So they were close. But then the PTSD thing, obviously, that builds up over time. All the stuff that goes on, but the main event that took place really for me with the PTSD was we went to do a job, and when you walk into a job, you're always in single file, so you don't spread wide. You just go in single track. And I was the last man at the back of the patrol, and where we stopped in a field, I stopped next to this little Afghan house, like a little hut. And a family of three came out, so a dad and two kids, and it was a boy and a girl, the two kids. And the girl came up to me, and she was trying to ask me for something, but because I didn't understand what she was saying, I just didn't know what she was talking about. But she lifted her sleeve up on her arm, and she had a septic infection from the wrist to the shoulder. So it was completely septic all the way down. So she was going to die of infection. And she was probably about 4 years old. And I radioed ahead because we had a doctor at the front, and that was probably like 300 or 400 meters ahead. And I radioed ahead and said, "Oh, we've got a young girl here. She needs medical help." And they just said, "Oh, leave her there. We've got a job to do. Just leave her." So we had to leave her there with this infection at 4 years old, and that was the for me at the time, that was the trigger for my PTSD, because you're there to help, and now you're just leaving that kid to die, you know. So, you'd think with all the other stuff, like people getting blown up and shot and killed, and you'd think all that would cause the PTSD, but it was just that one situation or that one event which really sent me off the edge. And that was the day then, at that point, that was coming into 2012, and that was the day where I said, I'm leaving the army, because I was done at that point.
Was that because you still had on mind this specific situation, or did it compound with other stuff as well?
I don't think the other events compounded as such, because every time I used to talk about it, they never bothered me. I could talk about it quite freely, but when it came to that event with that girl, as soon as I'd start talking about that, before I had hypnotherapy, I couldn't talk about that situation without breaking down. You know, I'd be an absolute mess. You know, and the problem I had was before I started hypnotherapy, obviously my daughter's 3 now, and it got to the point where I'd be playing with my daughter and it would just start coming back, you know, constant reminder every day about what had gone on in Afghan, because my daughter was approaching that age, see. So I thought I was okay for quite a few years, you know, for a very long time. I thought I was okay for bloody, I don't know, 8 to 10 years. I thought I was okay, you know, and I was managing well and stuff like that. And then just one day it all just came back.
And is there some kind of support available when you are on a mission?
Not at the time, not so much when you were on deployment. You had like the Padre, who was, you know, they were part of the church, the military church, if you like. You could always go and talk to them if there was issues, and if they felt that there was a, you know, major threat to anything, you know, like suicide or anything like that, they would report it. You'd probably get sent home from deployment at that point. But at the time, there wasn't a great deal of support, and even back on base, at the time, PTSD was still, it was recognised, but it wasn't very well dealt with. You know, there were means of support for people with PTSD, but it wasn't as good as it is now. And like, I went to the doctors talking about, you know, I was struggling and everything that was going on, and they said, if you go down with PTSD now and you're diagnosed with PTSD, officially diagnosed, you could get medical discharge. And at the time, I didn't want to leave the military. I sort of like 50-50 of whether I wanted to leave or not, and I wanted it to be on my terms. So I didn't go down the route of being fully diagnosed with PTSD at the time. And that didn't come until later, see, so.
And what about your colleagues at you know, whether mission or in the army? Is it how common is it, you know, to have PTSD?
So I've got a friend who was on my team, Dave. I won't say his last name because I don't want to give his name away. But Dave, he was always the guy that was mentally robust. He was in good fit, you know, really strong guy, always toned, always in the gym. And you'd think that nothing could get, you know, if you met him, you'd think that nothing could bother him. And when I started feeling, at the time I didn't know it was PTSD, but when I started feeling like things were coming on and I was starting to get short-tempered and quite snappy, I phoned him and I was like, man, I don't feel right, you know, I'm struggling. And he said on the phone, he said, yeah, I am too. And he told me he was struggling. And just hearing that he was struggling made me feel a little bit better, because it knew then I wasn't on my own. Like, the conversation didn't really go much further than that, but it just gave me a bit of reassurance, knowing that, you know, it wasn't me just being a weak mind. It was, you know, causing problems throughout a couple of other people in my team as well.
If you want to boost your online presence, check out our digital marketing agency called Trailblazed. You can also enroll in our Skillshare course called The 10 Tips on How to Succeed in Your Creative Career, which was inspired by the podcast. Lastly, make sure to subscribe to our weekly newsletter called Creative Spotlight to stay up to date with the show and more. Links are in the show notes. Thanks.
And just as a side note, it's something I've been always curious about. What do you do when you're on a mission during the day when you are not out? What is there that you can do to spend your time?
It depends really. So obviously, when you complete a job, then what you've got to do then is get all your equipment ready for the next job, because as soon as the job comes up, you've got to be out straight on the ground straight away, within a couple of hours. So we first of all get all our equipment sorted, make sure we've got new batteries in the search equipment, make sure our ammunition's sorted, clean rifle. That can take, a good few hours itself. Obviously making sure you've got things like food rations, water, so you can just pick your kit up and go. Then after that's sorted, then you spend most of your time either working out in the gym, reading magazines, making games up of some sort. It depends. Anything to entertain yourself, really.
Mhm.
You could take laptops, although they didn't last very long because of like dust and stuff like that. So you have to make sure you're not
Oh yeah,
carrying
yeah.
around in the dust and stuff like that. But you still had like internet connection, because they'd have like a satellite on your base, on your patrol base. So there'd always, well, in most of them, there'd be a satellite there, so you can get a bit of internet connection as well. You'd have like satellite phones, so you can call home. But yeah, most of the time you're kind of just sitting around waiting, just trying to entertain
Mhm.
yourself until the next job comes up.
Yep. And so then, coming back to your experience, did you decide to leave the army after the mission, or did it take longer before you made final decision?
So obviously that event with that girl, that was my trigger point, where I was like, I can't carry on like this. And obviously we still had a few months to do on our tour. I think we still had like 2 or 3 months left to do our to complete the tour itself. And then when I got back, that was I didn't realize it affected me so much. That was just like, that was an event that really pissed me off, like really pissed me off big time. And that was the point where I thought, I want to leave, because if you're there to help people and you don't help people, then what's the point in being there? But then once I got back from deployment, obviously when you first get back, you're still pumped with adrenaline, so emotions don't really play a part, and PTSD for me didn't play a part or anything like that for about 3 months after I got home. And then once I got home and the dust started to settle, that's when I started to realize that I was struggling. I was
Mm.
getting angry. I was very easily triggered. Like loud noises wouldn't scare me, but they'd stress me out really bad. If I was in a constant loud noise, I'd get really, really anxious. And at that point, then I was like, I need to leave the military, because can't cope being in. And then when I did leave, I started to work back in construction for a little while. And then because I was struggling with the PTSD, then I was really struggling to be out of the military. So I just wanted to go back in. I was like, I
Mm.
need to go back in, because I can't cope outside. So I couldn't cope in, and I couldn't cope out. And I thought going back in would help. So at the time of going back in, bear in mind I'd left the army. I was married in the army as well, and my ex-wife was injured in an IED blast. Her vehicle got hit by an IED and broke her back. And when I was considering going back in, because I think I was like 28 years old, 28, 29. I was like, I don't want to go back in the army, because I don't want to go back through, wearing green kit out in the field, carrying a lot of weight and stuff like that. So I thought all I want to do is just have the structure of the military, but still have a bit of an easier life in a way. And the army is quite full on. So I ended up joining the Navy. So I trained for 12 months. I trained like really trained hard. I was doing, half marathons, triathlons. I was doing like 13 fitness sessions a week. I was really going hard. And it was to
So it's
join,
if,
compared to what I
if
was doing.
compared to
Yeah,
previous training, different.
it was much, much hard. Like, because I knew, so the job I was trying to go for then at that point was what they call a mine clearance diver. So they're a diver that goes into the sea, and they're there to clear like sea mines and stuff like that. And they do bomb disposal. And that was something that really interested me, because we worked with the
Mhm.
divers in Afghan as well, because they're bomb disposal. And I knew that it was going to be hard to get in there, because it's it's a very, very high level of fitness again. So what I did then is I trained for 12 months. And then eventually I overtrained, really, because when it got to my selection, I was, one of the ones at the front of the selection. I got onto course, and within 6 weeks of being on my diver's course, I started to have sinus problems with the water pressure. So that caused a sinus injury. And then that meant I couldn't dive anymore. So then what I ended up doing in the Navy then is what they call a rebranch. So I retrained to do something else, and that was in the aviation. So I later started training to become an aircraft handler. So they work with the aircraft, the marshals that guide the aircraft, refueling, stuff like that. And I did that for like 6 years, 5 or 6 years. But remember I was saying, like, constant noise used to get me really stressed. And because we were working with helicopters, I was stressed all the time. I was really, really stressed, like constantly just on the edge, because of the noise. And at some point later on down the road, then my granddad died because I was on 2 weeks leave, and my granddad died at home, and I tried to save him from a heart attack, and he didn't make it. So that kind of pushed me even further then into depression, anxiety. The PTSD was really starting to kick off again, and then 5 weeks after that, my other granddad died. So that just sent me in a complete spiral, and that's when I really just lost it completely. I was, I wasn't eating right. I wasn't doing any fitness. I wasn't sleeping. I was a mess at work, and that went on for quite some time. And that's where the anxiety started kicking in. I thought I was having heart problems because I used to have real bad chest pain. My left arm would go numb. I just couldn't breathe. I couldn't move, and I thought it was my heart. And then I went through for a period for, I think it was about 6 months of, ECGs on my heart, like scans, cameras down my throat, x-rays, all sorts of testing to see what was going on. And they couldn't find anything wrong. They said I was absolutely fine. I was like, I'm not fine. There's something wrong. And one day I couldn't breathe, and I went into the doctor. I said, look, I need to see someone. And they said, all right, we'll see the doctor now. And he said, "Oh, just take your t-shirt, lift your t-shirt up so I can listen to your heart again." And I just broke down in tears. I was crying. And he said, "You're not ill. You're just struggling with anxiety." And that's the first time I understood anxiety properly. And they put me on, what's it called, antidepressants. I went on antidepressants for I think it was about 8 or 9 months, and they didn't do anything.
So like the pills.
Yeah, pills. Yeah, some medication. And that just made me feel worse. It gave me stomach issues, and I wasn't getting any better for 9 months. And I was just like, one day I just woke up in bed, and I was just like, I'm done feeling like this. Like, I can't carry on like it. So that's why I started looking into like meditation, getting off the medication itself, the antidepressants. I pulled myself off them. I said they're making me feel worse. I started doing self-help books, reading, meditation. And that helped quite a lot. It did help a lot, but it didn't fix the problem.
Is there some specific book that you remember that helped you?
So I never liked reading. I hated reading, and I was just like, I've just got to start reading books to try and get my mind, distract my mind. And the first book I picked up was Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. And it's a hell of a book. Like, that book is, I think it's about 350 pages with very small font, and it's a beast of a book. And it took me about 6 months to finish it, because I was only reading like 10 pages a day, or trying to get into reading because I didn't like reading. And it took me about 6 months to finish it, but I was like, I've got to finish it, because what I didn't want to do then is start forming a habit of not finishing things. So I started to make sure I finished that book before I went on to the next one. And started meditation. I used to listen to a lot of like Zen music on YouTube. And once I started to understand how that helped, the first thing I wanted to attack really was the anxiety. And I went online and I was looking for natural anxiety remedies. And there's a company, I think they're UK based. I don't think you get them anywhere else, but there's a company called Calms, Kalms, Calms. And they had a gelatin capsule, and it had lavender oil. Lavender, the plant. It had lavender oil in there, and they said it was really good for anxiety. So I thought, I'll try some of them. And I wasn't going to overdose because it's natural oils. So I ordered some of them. I double dosed, so I took twice as many as you meant to, as the recommended dose. But then within 6 hours, I was like so calm, so relaxed, and I felt amazing. I was like, right, okay. So the next thing I knew then, if I can get the anxiety under control, that would cause the chest pain to go away, and it did. And what I started doing then, I was like, right, the next thing I need to do now is get back in the gym. And I'd put on a bit of weight, and I was out of shape. So I understood like habit forming and, micro habits and stuff like that. And I was like, right, okay. So I didn't have any confidence going to the gym because I put so much weight on and I was so out of shape. And I knew that if I tried to go to the gym when it was busy, I wouldn't last very long because, lack of confidence. So what I did then was I knew like the gym at my unit, on my base, the gym was open 24 hours a day. You had a little key fob that you tap on the door and it lets you in. And I knew at 4 a.m. in the morning, the gym would be empty. So that would be my time to get there and start getting back into shape when nobody was watching. So what I did for a while was I would wake up at 4 in the morning, 4 a.m., and I would do that for a little while. I can't remember how long I did it for. It was like 3 or 4 weeks. But I would get into the habit of just waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd sit in my room at 4 a.m. just to get that habit and get consistent at waking up at 4. Then the next period after that, I would wake up at 4 a.m. and I would go and sit outside the gym, not in the gym, just outside the gym on my phone. And I'd just sit there for like 10, 15 minutes just to get that habit. And once I was consistent at that, I would then go in the gym and just sit on my phone for 10, 15. Do you know what I mean? I'm building little habits at a time.
Yeah.
And eventually I got to the point where, okay, I'm at the gym at 4 o'clock in the morning. Nobody's there. I'm going to get on the cross trainer, the cross trainers, because there's no impact. And I thought, I'm not going to push it. Just get into the habit of doing something. And I'd do like 10, 15 minutes on the cross trainer. And this whole period then took I think it was about 12 months, this journey of trying to build these habits. It was a long time, but I was getting consistent, and that was the important part. And it wasn't very long after, once I got in the gym and started doing some form of exercise, it didn't take very long to get back up to my level of fitness where I was at. I lost the weight. I got back up into good shape. I was meditating, reading books. I really sorted myself out. Then it didn't get rid of the PTSD in the background, and I still had the triggers, but I was definitely getting on a recovery at that point.
Yeah, I think what you said is great recipe how to start with some habits, because it's like what James Clear talks about in Atomic Habits, to start small rather than go full in the beginning, overdo it and then get discouraged. So it sounds like a good advice for someone. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I think if I had gone day one and go, right, 4 o'clock in the morning, I'm going to go in the gym. If I'd gone and done tried to do 20 minutes on the treadmill or weights, I would have hurt myself, damaged mentally. Just thought, I'm not doing it again. Then your confidence is gone again, and you're back at square one. So, like to anybody that's struggling, I always say, just start tiny habits. If you've never ran before, get used to walking to the shop instead of taking the car. And once you do that, start. You've done that for 2 months. Try to jog a little bit and walk and jog and walk and jog, and eventually you'll be able to jog to the supermarket. And what you're doing, then you're carrying your shopping back rather than putting it in the car. So you're doing a little bit of weight training at the same time without realizing. And over time, you'll start to get from being somebody who doesn't run to be able to do a mile, 2 miles before you're doing 5K, 10K. At that point, then but it's all tiny little habits all the time.
Yeah, and it might feel quite overwhelming if you think about it in the beginning, like a too big step. But if you start small, it's much easier to begin and start a new habit. Yeah. So then, how did you start treating PTSD somehow after that?
So no. So the funny thing is, I heard about therapy. I knew meditation was keeping me to some sort of level, level head. Although I still had the triggers. I put off any kind of therapy for 12 years. I just didn't do it because I thought it's not going to help. How speaking to somebody, men don't talk. This is why I do my YouTube channel now, about the PTSD, because men don't talk. And I was like, what's the point in going to see a therapist? They're not going to help. And it wasn't for like 12 years. And at the time of starting recovery on hypnotherapy, my daughter was a three-year-old, so I've got on LinkedIn, I've got at the time, I've got 17,000 followers. So I've got quite a big following. I'm quite active on LinkedIn. My business is built on LinkedIn. But I had gone for 11 and a half years being fine, and then, relatively fine. And then, suddenly all that like I said, the PTSD started coming back, and I didn't know why for like 5 months. I was a mess. Suddenly out of nowhere, after 12 years, I was just an absolute wreck, and I couldn't figure it out. So, I'd be avoiding time being in the house. I'd go out for walks. I wouldn't be doing any work. I'd be out the house, just get out the house and get away. And one day I was just playing with my daughter, and I was like, Jesus Christ, you're like the same age as that girl that we left in Afghan. And I realized then that she was my trigger now for the PTSD, So that was the point then where, bear in mind, for 5 months before that point of realization, for 5 months I was starting to struggle. I came out on LinkedIn. I put a video out, and I was like, you lot ain't going to expect this video. This is what's happening. I'm really struggling. I just came out on LinkedIn. I had to say something because I knew that my connections knew something was wrong. And I came out on LinkedIn. I said, I was really going through a hard time, and out of nowhere, I had 9 other men in my connections reach out and say, I don't know how you came out publicly and spoke about that, because they're struggling as well, but they can't talk about it. They don't know who to talk to. And I was like, man, this is a big problem. Many I didn't realize how big a problem it was, PTSD for men. And at the same time as those getting in contact with those other guys, I had 3 therapists reach out and offering me help for free. One was hypnotherapy, one was EMDR, and one was psychedelic trials. So I was like, right, well, obviously, like Dan Martin was my therapist, and he was the first one to reach out. He's a hypnotherapist. So I thought, well, I'll take him up on his offer. I'll go through hypnotherapy first and see if it works. And what I did with the other 2 offers, I passed them forward to people who need the help. So I just put a post that said, if you need EMDR or you want to try psychedelics, reach out to these guys. So I passed that forward. And I went through hypnotherapy, and the first session we had together was just a conversation, because they want to try and pinpoint where the trauma took place. So it's not really a therapy session as such, it's more just having a chat. I knew what the problem was anyway, because I knew the trigger, but they have to go back to your childhood and, talk through the whole end-to-end process or end-to-end journey. And, it was very clear that girl was the trigger for PTSD. So when we did the second session, that was proper hypnotherapy. So we went into hypnotherapy, and literally, like, that one session solved everything. Like, it removed the whole problem. Had gone. Like, I came out of that session completely different. Like, we just completely fixed the problem that I had. Obviously, I can still think about it. It's not like it's a forgotten memory, but it's no longer a trigger, and I can talk about it, and I don't get choked up, and I don't get emotional. Even thinking about it, I don't get bothered by it anymore. And I can't believe after 12 years of suffering that you could just turn it around in one session, just 1 hour like that. And it was just amazing, really, really amazing. Like, I know hypnotherapy doesn't work for everybody. I know not everybody, for people who it does work for, it might be 5 sessions, it might be 10 sessions. But for me, it just undone it, like, just instantly, within the hour. Absolutely, like, mind-blowing.
So is that something you would recommend people to try if they are struggling with similar issues?
Yeah, I would definitely I would definitely look at hypnotherapy, because it's a weird process, but for people who don't know or understand the energy, like, our bodies are energy. I know to some people this sounds all like hippie, tree hugging type thing, but when we talk about energy in the body, like, obviously we've got atoms, energy, vibration, everything's in our body. When we have a negative impact, that negative impact gets stored in the body as negative energy, and your body holds on to it. And for me, that was guilt, and that guilt was from leaving that girl behind. So that guilt then turned into anger, and that's why I was triggered so easy. But when we were, that guilt was in my chest and my stomach all the time. It was really in my chest a lot. And when we were going through hypnotherapy, I could feel that pressure go from my chest to my stomach. And throughout the session, it went into my legs, it eventually moved into my legs. So we were moving the energy around the body. And when I came out of that session, my legs, for 2 weeks, my legs were numb. Like, it was a weird feeling, like I was just constantly spaced out. I felt really good, but I was just like, I didn't feel like me anymore. I felt good. And when I got on the next call, because our calls were every 2 weeks, I got on the next call with my therapist, Dan, and I was like, man, like, the world is different. Like, I feel at ease. I'm not angry at home. Me and my daughter are playing. The relationship's getting better. Even at that 2.2 week mark, when I got back on that third call with him, I said my legs are still numb. My legs just felt like I can't even explain the feeling. It was weird, but like, I still get. Don't get me wrong. I'm not always happy. I still get pissed off sometimes. If my daughter won't do as she told, like, but that's like the normal, everyday.
Yeah.
Do as you bloody told. You're 3 years old. We've got to get out of the house, eat your dinner. The normal stuff that pisses parents off. I still get that, which is just normal. But I'm not like, 6 months ago, 12 months ago, if that happened, man, I'd smash the kitchen up. I'd destroy, all the food, cooking. I just take my anger out on stuff. I don't do that anymore. So it's definitely done its job.
Can you say a bit more about the process of hypnotherapy?
Yeah, so the way Dan does it, so I think there's different techniques, and the technique Dan uses, so you obviously close your eyes, relax your breathing, which sounds like you're going into meditation, and then you start to imagine, if I remember correctly, you imagine a timeline. So you imagine your timeline, then you imagine you're floating above the timeline, and then you've got to go back in time to where that event took place. And then what you do then, you replay it in your mind. So you play the event in real time, and I think it was in color or black and white. I can't remember, but basically you either play it in color forward in real time, then you rewind to the beginning as fast as you can in black and white, or it might be play it in real time, black and white, and reverse in color. I can't remember which way around it was, but then you play it over and over and over. But with PTSD, like, during that period, I could smell the dust that was in the desert. I could taste it. The heat. I could feel like I was reliving it. And when you start to play it in real time, as if it was taking place, initially it was like a 10-minute play, but as we were replaying it, I could replay it faster each time, as if it was getting easier to get through it. And then eventually, you just start to come out of it, like it just gets moved in your mind, and you see it from a different angle, and even like the perspective of, because I blame myself for leaving that girl behind for so long, thinking it was my fault, I should have done more, it was my decision. Changing the perspective of, it wasn't me, it was the doctor's decision, who was an officer, so they outranked me anyway, way above my rank. They made the decision to leave her there. So it wasn't even my decision. So it's not like I had any power to make that decision, but I could blame that doctor. But I've also got to remember that she was 300 or 400 meters in front, probably didn't even understand the situation, how bad the situation was with that infection. Maybe I could have said, no, like, she's really in trouble. We're not going until we've got medical attention. Maybe I could have done a bit more, but ultimately it was my decision. But then at the same time, I don't know if another patrol could have come through a week later and gave her the medication she needed. I don't know. So there's so many, ifs, what ifs, potentials that could have happened. She might be okay, and I don't even know. So
yeah, that's really interesting. I was curious to know more about the process. And do you still attend the sessions?
Yeah, so we're doing, I think we're doing about another 3 or 4 follow-up sessions, just to make sure everything's okay. If there's anything that's triggering me at any point, then we'll probably go back into hypnotherapy for a session. But I've got my hypnotherapist. I've got him on WhatsApp. So I can always talk to him on WhatsApp. we're quite close now in terms of as contacts, and I'm going to keep in contact with him anyway. And if I come across for my channel with the PTSD conversations, if I find anyone who's really struggling, I'll put them in contact with Dan as well to see if he can help them. But he normally deals with what's it called, addiction clients, so people who've got like drug addiction, alcohol addiction, stuff like that. But he understands that it's all to do with trauma. So obviously the addictions come from somewhere. You don't just accidentally fall into there. It's something that's triggered it. So hypnotherapy is always the same, going back to that event.
Yeah. And just to be aware of time, I know we haven't spoken about your LinkedIn career, but with this experience, are you trying to help others or spread the word about it? Because I know you run your own podcast where you discuss this stuff. So do you want to tell us more about this?
Yeah. So when I realized it was such a big problem, during the period of just before I started hypnotherapy, I used to watch a lot of YouTube. These guys that go around helping people with money, pay their rent, get them off the streets, take them out for a meal. People who are doing good deeds. And I was like, man, I'd love to, build a YouTube channel that helps men who are struggling with trauma. So I started that up, and I had a friend, Bentley, and he went through a lot. 20 years of PTSD. He tried to commit suicide with a shotgun. I said to him, would you be interested in an interview? And he said, yeah, let's do it. So he was my first interview to start the channel off. And then after that, then I posted that. Another guy came forward, then another one. And now I think I've got my fourth interview on there. I've got another one next week, one the week after. So it's starting to get momentum now. But the idea is at the moment, just at the minute, is to get stories collected, to understand how big the situation is, what kind of events take place for men to face trauma. So I'm just getting stories at the moment and trying to connect the people to therapists. And then over time, then it might develop into like a charity. I don't know where we'll go with it yet, but at the minute it's still very small, just trying to build it off. What it's like when you're getting started. It's very, very small and slow to start. So that's where I'm at with the YouTube stuff at the minute.
So what's the channel called?
Decision of Power.
Yeah, I will link to it in the show notes. Do you want to promote your services on LinkedIn as well?
Is it free marketing? Yeah.
No, when people can follow you and get in touch and find out more.
Yeah. So what I do now is I went into graphic design in January 2022 on LinkedIn. Started doing banners, like profile banners. Then we moved into full profiles for business owners. So what we do, we fully optimize profiles, keywords, search engine optimization, all the design, all the copy, in order to increase their conversion rate for their clients. So when they get traffic to their profile, it's a much better tool for inspiring or influencing a decision for clients to buy from them or to hire them. But recently we've started to focus more on working with coaches. So we build profiles for coaches now. So it doesn't matter what discipline, whether you're a fitness coach or personal development coach or business or finance, it doesn't matter. We just work with coaches now rather than business owners. But yeah, so what we're doing now with that is we're building profiles fully optimized, fully geared for conversion, in order to help them increase their client base. So that's what we do.
So is it something you enjoy, being creative?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, it's a good outlet as well because it keeps your mind occupied. At the time, I was still struggling with the PTSD and depression, so it was a really good outlet to sort of cope with that. But now I'm through that part. It's just about building the business, getting the best service we can for our clients, making sure we do the best job we can. It's not about the money. It's just about I like the challenge of results. So if we can get our clients results, I love it. I just get such a buzz off seeing clients do well because of what we've done. So yeah, I do really enjoy it now.
Yeah. So before we finish, is there something that you would like to share or something that I should have asked you and did not?
Not necessarily, but like, there's a question I always ask my interviewees at the end of an interview, and that's, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self who's going through the trauma? And it's always the same. You'd go back and say it's going to be okay. You're where you're meant to be. Just keep going. It'll get better. And I think that's what a lot of people need to understand who are going through some kind of trauma, whether it's a relationship breakup, they might have lost family in an accident, or veterans, or first response, or anything like that. Is, especially men, because we don't talk, I think it's important for everybody to reach out and at least try therapy, because I think people would be very surprised about how it works. Obviously, it will never remove what happened, but it definitely fixes the problem in terms of how you think and feel about it. So yeah, I would always tell people, get help. Reach out, speak to somebody, because people will listen.
Yeah, I agree. And it was a great example when you mentioned that you posted on LinkedIn and so many people reach out to you that they go through that stuff as well, but haven't spoken to anyone with that yet.
Yeah, it does work. You've always got somebody in your network who knows somebody else.
Yeah, and especially, you know how, for example, LinkedIn works, that it can connect you with people you would never expect to speak with.
Yeah, it's great
Cool,
platform.
Darren. I think then we can finish it for today. It was great to meet you. Thank you for opening. I'm sure that it probably wasn't easy and for you to be vulnerable with us and share your story. I hope it will help others. I will link to all the resources that we discuss. And yeah, it was great to meet you, and I wish you good luck with what you're working on.
Thank you very much, Thomas. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please leave us a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app, get in touch to provide your feedback, or share any ideas for future guests. Thank you, and see you soon.